Rajesh, let me start with you, please. For 5G networks to work efficiently, it will require zero-touch lifecycle management. How ready do you think the Indian networks are for that? We've launched it yesterday.
Well, I would say the entire automation is a journey. And this journey takes several years to get there. And we have seen the experience in the last 5 years, 6 years when the automation momentum started. And we have seen that in the 4G part of the world that yes, the journey started first with the virtualization and then moved towards SD and NFV and then automation. That's where the first automation started and then the entire lifecycle management. Now, when it comes to 5G, it's very complex and primarily because 5G calls about disaggregation, disruption of the network components. That's number one. Second, it talks about cloudification. And cloudification is just not about one workload, it's about several workloads of containers and then distributed this over across the edge part of the network. Then comes up across is that having created these domains, how do you automate them? Now, every domain has its own nuances, and the nuances, as you rightly pointed out, the automation is just not about doing just provisioning, it's about entire lifecycle management. And lifecycle management means that operations play a very important role, and the journey is towards predictive networks. And if you go towards the predictive networks, the important part which plays an important role is the net ops and the cloud ops. And both plays a very important role in this journey. Now to do that, it takes a lot of effort, and I don't think any service provider for the 5G, which we have seen, the service providers who have launched 5G has got to that level of automation yet. So that's the reason I said it's going to be a journey, and the journey will take several years to get there. Now, the important part beyond this, what's the outcome and objective behind doing all this is, of course, is a business outcome. So what our approach to the industry is that take use cases in this journey, right from design to tooling to provisioning to NetOps and cloud ops, identify the use cases which has a business outcome and take stepwise approach to get there and then start the journey somewhere. So that's where the complexity starts, and it's not an easy one. And then when we take all these domains, then how do you put the cross-domain orchestrator and lifecycle management again? So you can see the complexities and then integrate that into OSS, BSS layer for intent for the business outcomes.
So what you're telling me is very difficult to answer the question that I posted to you. Not that you don't have the ability to answer, but I think what we need to take back as the audience is that there's just so many moving parts. It's not very easy to say that this network is completely ready or that network is not completely ready. There will always be elements, there'll be the stages of maturity, and I think that's a very important part to remember. So thanks for that. Bradley, if I can move on to you, you are obviously the heart of that's coming together, right? You're supplying all of the stuff that is there. Again, there is the debate on whether it's hardware, it's software, all that will remain. But what is the role of technologies such as AI and ML, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning, expected to play in automating this network, including its maintenance, management, etc.? Where do you see that part?
Well, I think it's important to realize that automation and AI and digital techniques in general, they're not an option. They're mandatory to manage the networks of today and more importantly, the networks of tomorrow, particularly with 5G, with the inherent capabilities that 5G brings. So that's exciting, of course, but it means that you have to, in the networks today, using automation to do all the routine activities, highly automated, to keep the networks up and running and efficient and effective and cost under control is the foundation. Then when you start putting AI and machine learning on top, that allows you to start to shift focus to be more predictive and preventative, shifting from reactive. There will always be a need for reactive side of the process, but that'll get less and less over time as we move to zero touch. But things do happen in networks, right? Things break, so you have to have robust processes. So without using AI, and I would say the key to that, and I know colleagues on this panel share my view on this, is data is the key to making this work effectively and efficiently and unlock the value. So without standardized data models and actually having access to the right data, your machine learning algorithms are not going to be as effective as you want them to be. So what's key is actually getting the data right in the network and access to the data. What are the right performance measures to actually to look at, to join the dots, if you like, on how is the service performing in the eyes of the customer, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters when you're a telco, right? So focusing on those things, investing in automation and AI is the key for the future. But the processes that go with it are key as well, and digitizing those processes over time. And it is a journey. It will take time. But I'm sure as the technology evolves and as the services evolve, we'll get better and faster in that journey, I think.
No, thank you, Bradley. I think you and Rajesh before you have said something which is very significant. It's no longer, so it was a reactive situation, right? Because when things started maturing. And it went into a proactive mode. Today we are talking about predictive mode, which means that all the things that everyone individually does, whether it's a retail customer or the enterprise, you are actually looking forward and crystal gazing as to what the next move will be, so that you can then optimize, and therefore AI and ML is going to be extremely important from putting that. So that then, that gets me to the next question, which is to Ajay, which is, all this being said, finally it is incumbent on you to activate, right, to enable. What is it that, while it's the buzzword, from an operator's perspective, how is automation really playing out for you? What do you think are the priorities? Everyone would want that, but what can you prioritize and how can you configure, please? What are your perspectives?
Thanks. I think it's a very interesting question. That's from an operator's perspective, how does it all come together? Because my customers are actually waiting to see these services become live. They want to touch and feel. But my fellow panelist, Rajesh, did mention that it's a journey. There are a lot of moving parts. So, it's very difficult to say what is the start and where do we stop. But as an operator, what are we looking forward to from automation? We are looking to modernize. We are looking to automate our workloads. We are looking to automate our processes, also our mindset, so that the automation works for us. Now, automation has 3 pillars, as we understand. One is about service creation, so that we can rapidly deploy, innovate services and bring it to our customers. Second pillar is about revenue, very key for our customers from an operator's perspective as well. Ability to monetize the services, ability to make sure that these services are relevant for our customers. And the third important pillar for us is the customer experience, so that we are able to monitor customers in real time, ability to bring the services as from a customer's point of view. So these are the 3 pillars which we are looking from an automation standpoint. So with 5G, what we are wanting to do is to bring the services much more rapidly, much more in an automated way. As an operator, if we have to realize it, we have multiple challenges. I just want to enumerate a few of the challenges what we have in terms of network operations. As the networks are becoming more complex, it is imperative that automation will be the key as we unfold new services. Security will be a very big element of it. As 5G is getting rolled out, IP is going to the last leg, and security of every element, security from subscribers' data is paramount. How does automation help us to make our networks more secure? Revenue generation, operations, customer experience, and lastly, if we roll out enterprise services, how do we make sure that the network slices which we deploy, the private LTE and 5G networks which we deploy for enterprises are rolled out and deliver the services. Now, if we look into from an automation standpoint, automation has gone to the core, whether it is planning, whether it is deployment, operations, or customer experience. We have automation running all across the verticals. Without automation, we will never be able to run the complex networks as they have become. So I just want to summarize that we have embarked on this journey. It's not an easy one, but we don't have a choice.
Well, thank you, Ajay. Best of luck. And best wishes, because I know this is an arduous journey. And it's something that will always be there. I think this is a journey with no destination, right? Because the destination and goalposts keep shifting. Every new technology, it will always shift. You know, just if I may just ask the audience and engage the audience, how many of you have 80% of your daily needs on your phone? Any raise of hands? At least I do. I have almost 95%. And this is where the concept of securitization is going to become extremely important. Technically, that is your responsibility. But today, that responsibility is falling ever more on the networks, right? How they securitize every element of data, every consequence, every action that you are doing, because most of it or some of it can be personally identifiable information, right? And that's going to be extremely, you know that RBI has recently moved from 1st October, no website can actually store any personal credit card information of yours till you have tokenized it. Now, these are all, I would say, paradigm shifts in terms of movement in securitizing people's financial as well as personal information. So that's how important this is becoming. And when you multiply it on 800 million subscribers doing close to 2-3 transactions a day, we're talking about billions of transactions, right? So that's the kind of, I'm sure I'm an amateur at it. Mr. Jain will probably know better of this, but these are just implications for us. So having talked about, obviously, the service provision, the equipment, the operators, let me get more onto the data and the subscriber or the customer side of it by asking Dave a question, because this all is every element of what we are actioning on our phone or on our devices generates data, right? How do you see that? And this is really one part of the question, Dave. The other part is all this pushes total cost of ownership. How do you see that efficiency and actually automation will bring about efficiency, and that will bring down the lower cost of ownership so that the operator can actually price the model in such a way that there's far more adoption than what we are anticipating? Sorry, I know it's a longer question, but sure. I'm sure you're a veteran of all these questions.
That's okay, no problem. So I'll come back onto the data part a little bit later, and we can ask everyone in the audience to participate in a little experiment, perhaps. But in terms of the cost, the first thing to remember is telco is an expensive business. I'm sure all of these gentlemen on the panel would agree that it's not an inexpensive occupation. To go and create and deliver value to consumers. And I think, you know, we're here at the India Mobile Congress, so it would be remiss of me not to mention that I think that the work that all of the operators in India are doing is just phenomenal when we look at the cost of data, right? I think it's a tremendous job that they do, especially when I look at how much my bill is that I pay in Europe. It's significantly different. So they're already optimized, right? This is my point, that they're already optimizing, which I think is a struggle for many other operators with lots of legacy. I think the other thing to remember is the cost that we're talking about, the way to drive the cost down has already kind of been mentioned, I think, by the other panelists. But essentially, if I put it more into how the technology gets deployed, it's about software-defined everything. And we're seeing software-defined networks. We're seeing network function virtualization and a plethora of other techniques and technologies, containerization, all these sort of things that are helping to drive down the cost. Because if you have hardware that is running idle because it doesn't have enough of a workload, but another piece of hardware is operating that, and you can virtualize it, that's a much more sensible approach. And we've seen that in enterprise computing for a very long time. It's been prevalent in telco, of course, for a long time, but as we move into this 5G advanced 6G paradigm, that becomes more relevant. And that relevance plays into the automation that we talked about earlier as well, and this zero touch. How do you get zero touch? So that brings us back onto the data, right? If we don't have data, we have a problem. But the problem with the data is the quality of the data. If we don't have quality data, we can't really make informed decisions. So we're really moving from a machine learning type of algorithm approach to a deep learning algorithm approach. And I still think we're a little bit far away from realizing the benefits of deep learning. And the major difference is in deep learning is that's when you're really using the artificial neural networks to give you this cognitive behavior. So I know that everyone is talking about the artificial intelligence. I prefer to think of the cognition that this can bring around. And that comes from multiple sources of data. And that brings it back to consumers. So I'm a consumer, you're a consumer. I'm assuming after your comments that after this session, you'll be glued to your mobile phone to do your work, right? Because you're 95% reliant on the technology. So I'd ask everyone in the audience to do me one favor. You all have a mobile phone. Could you take your mobile phone out? Could you take a picture either of us or of yourselves? If you could do that for me, that would be amazing.
The hidden agenda is he's trying to push the networks up, right? So the utilization is important, the commercialization is important. That's what funds the investment.
So the point of this exercise is, does everyone appreciate what just happened? So you all took pictures, they're stored on your phone, they're probably now in some cloud somewhere. It's already gone. It's already been transmitted. That data is already being analyzed. It's gone through the network at lightning speed. If you chose to use an app like WhatsApp, for example, and send that to somebody else, guess what? It went through the network again, and it got replicated. It got replicated in your own cloud because you don't want to lose your data. So your network provider might offer you such a service, lots of storage, which is usually triple replicated, right? You've now sent it to somebody else. And guess what? Well, they don't want to lose their data either, so it's triple replicated there too. But in between, there's a massive amount of operations that are taking place. I find it astounding that the gentlemen on this panel have created such technology and been able to deploy it for us to not even notice what's happening. So I think that drive to get better costs, I think they're on top of it. I think it's the software-defined infrastructure, it's software-defined everything, and the demands that the consumer is placing upon them is just increasing at an exponential rate. I think I read a stat somewhere that we're creating 2.5 quintillion bytes of data or gigabytes of data, which is, I mean, I can't even imagine that number, all right? And so, we've already seen efficiencies being created. We've seen TCO improvements of 60%. There's another part of this, right? So software is one part of it. But the other part of it is the horizon of technology is changing. So everyone has got to keep on top of where this is going. Chip technology, I think, is fascinating. And I think that's going to play heavily into the cost reduction in the future. So even today, you can buy CPUs that are network optimized. They've been designed specifically for telco providers. So they can optimize their network functions, for example. There is VNNI as an extension that Intel introduced some time back, which is the neural network extension inside their chip. So if you want to take advantage of that, or there's AVX 512. So these things, I think, have been around for a little while. I think what's going to be really interesting to drive the cost down, we've seen announcements recently from the likes of AMD. So Lisa Su has announced that they are going to incorporate an FPGA alongside a CPU, inside a CPU package. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to think about all of the application-optimized silicon that is being invented to suddenly find its way inside that package. The benefit of that is energy conservation. And I think that's something we haven't really touched on. So we're going to see these types of technologies lend themselves to much lower power. And that's really important. Of course, because of climate change, that's, a paramount concern, but also from a cost point of view. If you're not consuming energy, you're not paying for it. So the operators are able to pass that cost saving on to you. So this horizon of new chip technology, I think, is important. And then something else that we're working on as well is liquid immersion technology. And that allows us to save even more energy. So the 60% or so savings that they're making, add to the 20% to 50% they're saving with chip technology, and then you start getting even further savings by using full immersion technology, your cost is driven down. So that means the cost of processing the data is also reduced. However, data is still king. Understanding data, having enough of it, having the right quality of data is still a challenge. And that's where I think we're at the moment and into the near-term future for sure.
Thanks, Dave. That was very comprehensive. In fact, two things that I just wanted to add there. One, you said about power. I think power from every aspect has to be conserved. We have to be far more efficient with the amount of data that is being pushed through the network. If you look at it in terms of power consumption and the data output, we are, I don't know how many X of what we used to be probably 10 years back. But the sheer volume that is getting in is anyways pushing the kind of network loads up from a efficiency or from a usage perspective. So that's one very important one. Excuse me. The second one that you said, we take pictures. Obviously, I'll tell you, not so much my origin, because Aggarwals generally are very miserly. Earlier, when you took a photograph with the real camera, right, you would be very worried that you had to take the shot because you were consuming the reel, right, and that costed. Today, with digital, you don't even think about it. You take 5 different exposures for something that might be absolutely useless. But the fact is, have you realized that the camera has become so much more sophisticated, right? The pixels, everyone wants more and more pixels, but that also means that each photograph is becoming heavier in terms of the data consumption. And then you're pushing that through the network. Our TVs have become from ordinary to 4K. The kind of data you're pushing through your network is just amazing. So yes, I guess when we start looking at the statistics, they start speaking a lot more than what we typically imagine. So let me come back to you, Ajay. On self-optimizing networks. This is helping improve network efficiencies and the experience. What do you think are the guiding principles around the implementation of something like that?
At an Airtel, we have only 2 pillars where we view every actions what we do. The first is our customer experience, and second is the cost to serve. So every action what we do, we view them with these 2 pillars. We just heard from some of our panelists talk about that we are moving very rapidly from reactive to proactive to predictive. If we have to embark on this journey, self-optimizing network or closed-loop automation is a very, very important aspect of the networks. With 5G coming in, it further adds to the impetus what we've already earmarked on the journey. The closed-loop automation is not only limited to only one aspect of it, but it embarks at all aspects of a network journey, whether it is deployment, planning, operations. We've kind of looked into closed-loop automation from all aspects and then realize it to make sure that we are able to deliver experience what the customers are expecting from us. Traditionally, SON is, people think it about only as a RAN technology and deployed multiple applications around that. But we have taken it much more notches above. In RAN, we have already deployed some of the use cases which my fellow panelists talked about, energy saving, which we call PSF, the power saving features, to ensure that we don't consume power when it is not required. We have automated our networks to ensure that subscribers are at the right layer, right load balance, ensure that networks runs very efficiently. So those are some of the RAN features. On the transport side, we ensure that the latencies, congestion, traffic is all balanced across the multiple layers of transport networks which we have created. Operations standpoint, to ensure that whenever we have issues, can we remotely solve it. Issues can be identified through the RCs itself, and then closed loop automation works to fix it. So SON as a technology is very, very important and a very important aspect of how we run these networks. With 5G, it is giving us a lot more areas when we are deploying these 5G networks. And if it's ORAN, it also brings up the XApps and RApps. So we are very eagerly awaiting that to deploy these technologies to be able to make our networks much more efficient.
Thank you, Ajay. It also brings to light, it's also the expectation that's changed, right? Earlier, if you needed to change anything in the network, make amends, improve something, at least a customer or a user would always think this is the turnaround time for 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, 2 days. Today, the expectation is dwindled down to just, why can't it happen immediately? Why is the provisioning not happening? Why is it delaying? So I agree, the optimization and the use of software in managing the decentralized network is becoming more and more important. So thank you for that. I'll move on to Bradley. Bradley, we've also discussed this in the earlier panel. I think 5G and 5G plus and 6G onwards, there's also expected to be a very significant shift in the cultural part of the organization, right? The processes that are underlying this. So one question around that, how do you see that organizational practices and processes are expected to evolve with the adoption of virtualized network operations? Where do you see? I'm sure you see it from your perspective as well as from the operator's perspective.
Yeah, this is a really important part. I think some of the comments that have been made, I think moving to a virtualized world, we need to capitalize on the benefits and we need to standardize things as part of that. Otherwise, we won't realize the benefits of it. So that's really important. But digitizing and standardizing the processes is just one part of the journey. You need to take the organization, the skills of the people that are using those processes need to evolve and change over time. So bringing together the skills of data science, data engineering with the telco domain expertise is really key. And actually shifting the attitude or the decision-making logic in people's minds to be thinking about end-to-end services that consumers use is key. Now, to make that happen, you actually need to make things visible for people. If you can't measure it, they say you can't manage it, and that's a reality. So being able to, again, it's back to the data side of things as well, having access to the right data that gives the engineers in the organization, and actually in reality, all parts of the operator's organization, one version of the truth, clearly articulates what the customer experience is, by default fundamentally changes people's attitude and decision making because they're using data in a different way, gives different context and different perspective. And that's super key. And I'm sure Ajay and the rest of the colleagues and other people's in the room that have worked with this, we all know that's the reality. And it is a journey, but you have to keep reinforcing that with the organization. Every chance you get to use data and information in a customer-centric context unlocks value from the organization and drives organizational cultural transformation. So I think that's really key. And investing in that, investing time and investing in training and developing people is the key, and you can never drop the ball on that, actually, in my view, because it's an ongoing journey and you need to keep up the focus.
Yeah, this journey is now becoming more and more important. Everyone, you just can't call it a destination. This will be a journey.
Yeah, and if I can just add a little bit more, if we think about 5G and what that capability is going to unlock, the amount of innovation that is going to come in the years to come, where operators can offer differentiated services without the data and without being able to measure the the performance of those services, you know, it's going to be hard to manage the customer experience and the customer expectations. And that's where what Dev said, you know, deep learning or machine reasoning to enable intent-based operations, so managing the performance or the customer experience of differentiated services and having that automated and using those techniques is where the future is. And I personally think that's super exciting. It really is. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the engineers that are working with this, they see that as exciting as well. So it's highly motivating for them as well.
Thank you so much, Bradley, on that. Rajesh, maybe, you know, there's a lot of questions around how, obviously, as they were saying, this is a very expensive proposition. And 5G has made it even more expensive because the fundamentals that were built on over the last generations have now quite significantly moved. What are some of the key services that you see that telcos would be able to monetize through the adoption of network virtualization and automation capabilities? Because that's going to be very important.
That's a billion-dollar question because every service provider in the world is anticipating this. And I'm sure everybody knows what the answer is, but there's not a clear answer to it. The anticipation is that we're going to transition from consumer 5G to an industry-based enterprise 5G. And I don't call it enterprise 5G, I call it as a vertical 5G. Because you're going to transition from consumer 5G to enterprise 5G, which is private 5G. But the real solutions are going to come from the vertical industries as you're seeing here on display. That's where I see as a very big monetization, and the study which Cisco has done in the last several years, that the next 5 to 10 years, the vertical solutions offering by the service provider into these industries is going to translate a huge growth, not in terms of revenue, but in terms of profitability. That's the number one which we see as a big expectations in the industry. But that's not the only thing. As you transition into these kind of services, the other important part is that how do you transition to network as a service as well? Now, what I mean by network as a service is that while I have my service provider network, which is open, programmable, all that is fantastic. But how do you integrate them to ancillary technologies, for example, like SD-WAN? And how do you make the services integrated as part of the SD-WAN, because my network service is not going to flow only through my network. It's going to go to the outside the network as well. That's where how you start integrating into different technologies of SD-WAN or SASE and those kind of integration to offer network as a service. And that will evolve into a multi-cloud journey. Dave took an example of energy-based, why energy efficiency is so important in the telco networks. Completely agree with you. And I'll give you a very fantastic use case here. When I say multi-cloud, it's primarily from a perspective that, as an example, like right now today in Germany, the power costs have gone up so high. India has not yet gone to that level yet because of obvious reasons. Now, if I have a workload which is sitting in Germany today, and my services I see it's much more efficient and economic in terms of power consumption in India cheaper, I can automate this as part of my multi-cloud journey to move that workloads into India. And that workloads could be enterprise workload if I've offered that as a service, or my own internal workloads as well. So that's the number 3. Number 4 is all about bandwidth and latency. And bandwidth and latency is where you start getting into the journey of slicing. And that's where the automation, which we all spoke about as a fantastic technology, will help us to monetize there. There's a lot of expectation that slicing, whether it's an internet slice or an enterprise slice or an IoT slice or a latency slice, is where you need a cross-domain orchestration and a lifecycle management of telemetry, visibility, and assurance. Because slice is not just about provisioning, it's about assuring that as a service. It could be for any of those enterprise, vertical, IoTs, anything. So this is where I see as a big 5G services which I spoke about, is where the monetization is expected. But all this is going to happen over a period of time. What you're seeing the use cases on display here is actually happening in a lot of countries, right? They are in the progress of adopting it right now, but the entire industrial automation 4.0 is a step towards it.
Well, thank you so much, Rajesh. Sorry, may I just request the audience if you can put your phones on either vibrator mode or on mute, because it's very difficult for people to, concentrate on the panel and these rings keep going off. Sorry, can that be done, please? Thank you. Okay, Dave, if I can move on to you. I understand you guys have been running a panel with a major telco and demonstrated significant infrastructure savings and costs. Would you like to just give some example of how that's been achieved and what really was it that you started with as a pilot?
Sure. So this goes back to the liquid immersion technology that we've deployed. We started talking to our client in 2019, and they, of course, have 5G very much in their sights, and the deployment of radio towers and then, of course, mobile edge computing, the number of sites increases dramatically. And what they were looking for is, how do they make sure that they don't have to build a traditional type of data center? How do they save costs, essentially, right, in that arena? So part of our solution was to work with a number of our technology companies, so Supermicro, AMD, Micron, and Asperitas and Shell, to create a tank that we could put this IT equipment in at the mobile edge. So we've been running that for roughly 2.5 years now, and there are some very interesting findings, I would say. So the first finding is that we've gone from a PUE measurement of 1.7, which is the power usage efficiency measurement, so a PUE of 1.7 to 1.05. And it's 1.05 consistently. So there's very little fluctuation in the PUE. So that's a major benefit. That's a huge cost saving. And of course, they don't have to cool any air in that tank. They don't have to have fire suppression because they're not building a traditional data center. So there's a number of different benefits. But of course, liquid is much better at transference of heat than air is anyway. And we chose to go this full liquid immersion route just because we know that that is the most efficient, or we believe that that was the most efficient. There are other cooling technologies that we also have, so single phase, dual phase, and then full liquid immersion. But we felt that in this particular case, that was important. So energy was saved, right? That's a really important metric. The other important metric is the mean time between interrupt, or the mean time between failure. So we've been running, as I say, for roughly 2.5 years. We've had 0 IT failures, which I'm sure the rest of the panel will understand is a pretty significant achievement to have 0 IT failures. Again, that drives down cost because we don't have to send an engineer, we don't have to raise a ticket, we don't have to worry about the product itself. And that continues to run, right? And it's running, some of the production codes. They've made, in fact, I can't say the number, but it's in the billions of calls that have been made. And they've had less than 5 call drops, as an example. And that shows the reliability of the equipment running in that immersion fluid. It's increased dramatically. We're running at 50 degrees temperature, 50 degrees C, which is pretty amazing for IT equipment. And then there's another benefit that I think we're probably not there yet for this phase. Certainly not here in this particular location. But the return water temperature is 60 degrees. So actually our target is to run hot data centers. Everyone talks about cooling in data centers. And our target is to get as much heat out as we possibly can, so we can reuse that heat. So we reuse the heat energy for something else. So some nice examples are, hey, put a swimming pool next to a data center, right? And you can preheat the pool. That's a fantastic use case. But real world applications are things like agriculture. So if you have a greenhouse or a glass house, then actually you need heat for that environment. So that's a really good use case. If you have laundries that are close proximity to a data center, and when I say close proximity, you can transmit this heat very efficiently up to about 10 kilometers. So, that's quite a distance even then. You can put it into laundries, so you can switch off their boilers when they're washing clothes or drying their clothes, right? So this is a really good use of the waste energy. So if we're able to bring that to the telco industry, it means that the industry itself naturally becomes less wasteful across thousands of sites. So I think those points, the PUE reduction, the fact that we're able to reuse the heat energy that's coming out, the reliability of the equipment, is just proof that the telco operators are not resting on their laurels. They're not saying that we've got everything right. What they're saying is, let's look at what the future is. Let's look at how we work with other companies. They're not incubating themselves with themselves. They're actually opening their arms to work with, systems integrators like Boston, which I think is amazing.
Thanks, Dave. While you were talking, sorry for saying this, but got me into fantasy realm of putting a swimming pool right next to a data center. But, that also brings back when power industry started talking about combined cycle, right? People used to laugh, what rubbish. The steam is dissipated, how can we reuse it? We did that, there's a lot of benefit to it, I guess. And the second thing that you brought on is TMT will no longer be just connectivity or telco. TMT is going to empower literally every sector, right? So when we talk about any sectoral vertical, and we do not include the concept of TMT, this is just beginning of 5G. Just imagine what a 6G is going to probably bring out, right? The realms are going to be just unimaginable. So talking about every sector, we are already talking about machine learning, we're talking about Industry 4.0, machine-to-machine learning, efficient production, efficient supply chain, efficient logistics. All that would mean that you need to have these intelligent networks actually being the backhaul of everything that you're trying to do and the decision making. So I think that's a very important aspect that you were bringing out. And this is not far. While I said fantasy, but it's not far. And some of the normal consumer-based use cases can be actually very efficiently put to work. Okay, so I think we're done more or less with round of questions between the two panels. We've more or less covered just about everything that at least I can think of. One of the things that was not emphasized so much initially was on security. It was brought out in the first panel, but then Ajay brought that out right up front to say that all data you're doing, all digitization you're doing, security is going to be paramount apart from the other things. So that's going to be very important. I'm open to asking anyone from the audience, is there any question that they have? Please just raise your hand, call out your name, and if you want to direct it to any panelists, please call their name out. Otherwise, if you want to keep it open, we can have it that way also. So anyone wants to ask a question? Yes, please. Can we have the mic over to you? It'll be difficult for someone else to hear what you're saying otherwise.
First of all, good afternoon to every panel memberist. I was really happy for being here because I got so much insights and everything. My question is from Mr. Ajay Jain. So, as you have said that at the end, Airtel is going to implement these automations, network automation things. So, what are can you share some of the techniques, technology, or tools that Airtel are going to use for the network automation?
Sure. As some of my co-panelists have said that automation, there is not only one thing which defines automation. Now, we do have a lot of data. There was talk about data. The one thing as an operator, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of subscriber data. We have a lot of network data. What we're trying to do is to combine both the things and create outcomes which can then be used for driving experience. Now, as an operator, what we have now gone into is not only identify issues at a network level, but we are also able to identify issues at a per subscriber level. So as a consumer, we are able to map out your journey, whether you are a gaming customer, whether you are using networks for learnings, where are the locations, where you're using the network for, what kind of latencies, customers are expecting. We're able to map out everything and then use this information not only to optimize, but also plan the networks. Because every customer's needs are different. If there are enterprise customers, there are retail customers, we design these networks basis that. All that learning is also coming together as we're now planning these 5G networks as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yeah, please. Sorry, can we have the mic here?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I have a question, maybe it's again for Ajay. So there are a number of possibilities of having an intelligent network, but can you help us understand what might be one of the immediate use case, which will be also very subscriber or customer centric AI-based use case, which can get rolled out, maybe not immediate, in some time of the coming days?
These are the perils of being the first to launch 5G.
That's one of the reasons
Okay.
I'm again asking Ajay.
Okay, you mentioned that any use case which may be rolled out in future, but it is not about future, it is the present we're talking about. So that will resonate with you. Assuming a customer has an issue, now we can work two ways. Customer can tell us the issue, and then we can identify what the issue is. We can ask the customer what his issue is, right? Or we can identify from our networks itself what the possible issue is. And when you call the call center,
Predictive network, basically.
or prediction, I will go next step, but at least proactive. When you call the call center, the call center agent already knows what kind of an issue it is. Whether we already have an operational issue going on at a particular location, whether we've identified an issue related to his experience as well. And the conversation will be very different. Saying that the agent will be able to tell you, sir, ma'am, we already know this issue is going on. This is the TAT. There is a lot of data science, there is a lot of big data analytics which goes in to identify this, make sure that at an instant in time we have that information. That's level one. Level two, even before the customer identifies an issue, what is the possibility where networks identify the issue? Networks are able to take decisions, take RCS, and closed loop automate it and fix those issues. That's the journey where we are in right now.
So I will identify with what Ajay was saying. In a lot of cases now, as you call up a call center, they are able to tell you that this is the reason, these are the things, which is far better than what it used to be, that we will get back to you.
Yes.
Right? That was the standard response.
100%.
So I identified there. The other thing that I can just mention to everyone is the difference between proactive. Ajay was mentioning what proactive is. Predictive is, I'll just give you an example, right? And this has also been done in the power sector now, because that was a significant issue that most networks used to face. And in India, while we are getting to an integrated network, we didn't have an integrated network before. The challenge is you have usage patterns, and which in telecom is also there, right? It's a utility finally. You know when the peak volumes are actually taking place.
Exactly.
So they are trying to predict, but challenge has been that in the post-COVID scenario, how you need to optimize which part of the network is very difficult, because today the needs are shifting very quickly.
Exactly.
And enterprise and consumer are more as, I don't know whether I would like to call it that way, but I think the difference is blurring, right? Because of the usage pattern. So I think you want to say something, Ajay, please go ahead.
I'll just talk about the predictive aspects of it, Before we deployed a lot of AI, right now, we're actually using AI and predictive to identify faults which are going to happen in the network, and we're actually fixing them before they actually happen. So a lot of data is going in, and to a technician, it's a lot of education, because technicians are used to seeing something red and they fix it. How's the conversation? You tell them this LED will go red 3 days from now, so you better fix it today.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of education required in the entire ecosystem to make this predictive analytics work, but it is already in operation.
Though why I started smiling is I could see Bradley actually smiling from year to year saying, this is part of the cultural change also. You know, it's finally people at the end of it. You might call it intelligence, but intelligence is also built on the experience of individuals, right? And that's going to be an extremely differentiating point between which network can actually do that and configure it and bring about that change vis-a-vis someone who really pays lip service to it and not really able to execute it within time, within the cost, and with the customer experience that is desired. So that's going to be extremely important. Unless there's any other question, I'd probably ask the panelists to quickly, okay, one more. I think, sorry, if time permits, this will be probably the last question because this one spawned a lot of debate and yes, please.
Yeah, hello. My name is Deepak and I'm representing VMware. My question is to Rajesh, Mr. Rajesh. So it's pretty evident that CSPs are embracing cloud first and multi-cloud as of today. And I would like to understand, are CSPs also embracing SASE? Because as the panelists mentioned, security is paramount. So you mentioned 5G vertical or even for consumer industry. How are CSPs partnering with SASE and SD-WAN as of today to deliver solutions for consumer and industrial IoT?
So that's a good question. We are seeing a lot of CSPs are offering multi-services from that standpoint, right? One is, of course, the basic MPLS and those services, which they have now migrated towards SD-WAN, and now integrated SASE as part of the SD-WAN solution as well. And they're offering this as a cloud hosted or on their on-premise hosted as a service offering. Now, that's pretty prevalent into a lot of countries, not only in India. We have seen this across, because Cisco has a technology of SD-WAN and SASE and SD-WAN has got integrated that now, and offered this as a managed security solution as well. So, integrating with not only as a service from a SASE, but we also integrate the device security. Like we have Duo, we have integrated Duo as part of the solution to offer device security and SASE as a part of the edge offering. So a lot of CSPs across the world are offering this as part of their journey, integrated as part of their offering from a cloud standpoint. And as I said, the journey is going to be more towards a multi-cloud. And that's where you will see more and more services getting integrated from a multi-cloud standpoint and how you offer more integrated network and security services together. Then it's all about how do you apply the policy management. So when you bring the pieces together, the integration between the policy management of a service provider network, the enterprise network, and bringing the security policies together is where the entire transformation needs to happen.
If I may add, Rajesh, this is really part of bringing the costs up, which has to be leveraged with the more efficient use. Just giving an example, as a consumer, earlier you used to buy any of these security softwares, right, to securitize your own device. Today, the networks are actually providing you that security.
Absolutely. So that's the reason I said one of the offering is a NAS, which is a network as a security service, which is more sitting outside the network today as a cloud offering. But you will see that journey as we get into more and more advanced services or monetizing this. You will see the service provider network integrating that to bring a single policy management. Now, single policy management helps the enterprises or any of the other offerings as a one integration between a closed user group. That's a benefit. And that's how you bring down the...
As banking will integrate, everybody will securitize. So I guess this journey will continue, like you said right at the beginning, that this is a journey, it's with no destination. Goalpost keeps changing. That's the challenge with this. Thank you so much. I'll just ask Bradley to quickly probably conclude any other comments that you would like to highlight from a supplier's point of view, where you are seeing the challenges.
No, I don't think I've got anything really to add other than just to say it's great to be here, of course, and it's great. I remember being here in 2019 for IMC, and there was a lot of discussion about 5G then and getting ready. It's great to be here and see that 5G is coming to life here in India. Finally, I'm sure everybody in the room is excited about that, and it's a proud moment for India. It really is, and I know there's going to be lots of exciting times ahead, and I really expect to see a lot of innovation around 5G services come from India. So, India is a really important place for Ericsson. It's the center of our managed services global delivery capability, and we're really proud and excited to be part of that here. So, and it's been a great session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, like you said, innovation is going to be key. What's also important is that it's always going to lead the way, right? And it'll never be static. It's going to be so dynamic continuously. And by the time we are getting used to 5G, I think 6G is already there. We're talking about standardization, etc. So that'll be, so thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, this is really, we are taking the Mobile World Congress to the world. You have Bradley, who's come from the European theater. You have Rajesh, he's staying in Singapore, so you have the East there. So Rajesh, anything that you would like to just conclude quickly before we close this?
No, as Bradley said, it's really, I'm coming to IMC after 5 years actually. And I've been coming to India often, it's not that, but I was quite excited to see the kind of innovation which is on display here, right? Now, I'm not saying 5G is the only accelerator behind it. The journey started during 4G itself, but 5G is going to leapfrog this journey.
And enable that journey even
Absolutely more. Right. And I think it's so exciting to see this. I've been on the round since morning. Fantastic use cases, vertical use cases which I spoke about is on display here.
Absolutely. And it's not only these large-scale, big bang innovations, right? It's also the micro innovations that are taking place through the startups. Absolutely. I think that's a vibrant. In fact, we at KPMG, we're running this registration across startups, and we have multiple contests that happen. You will not believe the ecosystem that we have has already mapped out some 70,000 startups in India itself. So the structure, the ecosystem, apart from what obviously Ajay can always say that ours is the most complex, I think everything is becoming complex, but the advantage of anyone to make this happen will be how simple we can make this. So while all of us can talk very simply and give gyan, the fact is that at the end of it, there's a lot of complexity. Ajay, your last thoughts on that, please. Not the last in the sense, only on the panel, please.
I just want to confide something to this audience. At Airtel, we have been waiting for this moment to launch 5G, to bring these 5G services to you. But it has been momentous. Last 2 years, we've been working in the background. Things which will not be visible, things which will not show up. But there's a lot of hard work the teams have put in to ensure that as these services get launched, you have the best of the experience. So yesterday, you heard Prime Minister, you heard our Chairman talk about the launch of 5G services in the top 8 cities. We will rapidly roll out and make sure that the 5G services will meet up to your expectations. So thank you, dear. Thank you, everybody, to be patient to make sure that these services are available.
And if I'll just add one last bit on that, we know the commercial issues that the telecom industry in India has faced, and that's obviously on the base of our low tariffs, etc., etc. But as we say in consulting, be bold, be better. I think it's a fantastic move. It's being bold, despite all the investments, despite all the complexity. Our ecosystem has put the foot forward and said, let's introduce 5G, and that's very important. So never late, and better now than never. So Dave, on your, if you may just look at the data side of it a little more, it's no longer the new oil. I think it's the very essential oil that's moving every industry and every machinery. What would you conclude on?
Yeah, so I was going to bring it back to the whole point about data anyway. And the one sure thing is that data is not getting smaller. The amount of data that we're creating, so you've heard people talk about big data. I actually like to talk about small data and new data and how that moves through these networks and how it gets managed, how it gets interpreted. So data is going to grow and continue to grow, and the greater the bandwidth, the greater the data is going to be on those networks. And that fuels innovation. It creates opportunities for new companies. And that goes back to that remarkable number of 70,000 startups just in the KPMG ecosystem. I think that's amazing. However, there are some considerations that we need to be aware of, right? And that is with data and data analysis and data science, we need skills. And I would just like to point out there is still a huge skills gap in the market. So whilst we can gather data and you can have massive amounts of data, if you don't have the people to understand that data and interpret it and to code the systems, that is a thing that will keep us behind. I think India is very, very ahead. We spoke earlier, in fact, just before we came on stage, about the fact that India, I think someone was saying that it's in now, AI is in the undergraduate scheme as well, and there's a number of classes. There's centers of excellence that are being built. We're also doing the same thing. So whilst data is absolutely key to everything, just remember that we also need to keep up with how to manage that, how to interpret it as human beings as well.
Thanks, Dave. Just one point, I hope I'm not misinterpreted. I said we have mapped them. I don't know if we are working with them, because obviously that's a massive ecosystem. But ladies and gentlemen, there you are. I think a quick round of applause for the kind of expertise that we have had. And thank you. I know all of these gentlemen are extremely busy on managing half the problems or 90% of the problems that we typically face. So thank you for investing time, gentlemen.